At the very beginning, a very good place to start. When you read, you begin with A, B, C, C, C. Verbs, C, verbs. Verbs.
I'm running, jumping, singing, that's because I am a verb. I'm hopping, dancing, reading, that's because I am a verb. I'm a verb, verb, verb. I'm an action word.
Action verb! I arrive at the scene of a burning building. Alas, on the third story is a noun, and he says, I can't do anything! Yes, you can, I entreat him! I can what? You can jump to safety! Splat! On second thought, maybe you should try to run down the stairs. But no matter what you do when there's a fire, then you must stop! Drop and roll. No matter what you do, you must take action. So be an action hero, woman, man. Yes, you must strive for quick retraction of an action. Yes, they're big words, but I'm sure you understand. You must be taking action, making action all of the time. Always have adventure in mind. Yes, I'm taking action, making action all of the time. Whatever you seek, you shall find, 'cause you're an action verb. Yes, an action verb. It may sound absurd, but you're an action verb. So you can see, hear, dance, sing, meow, swoon, love, cry. Sometimes it exhausts me.
Cut! That's a wrap! Everybody take 5.
Oh, excuse me.
No worries, man. You're here. Come in. Just be.
Who are you? I don't mean to intrude.
Dude, I'm a linking verb. Be like me. Express a state of being, man.
I am confused.
Exactly, man. You equals confused. When you hear a verb you can replace with an equal sign, that's me, man. I'm all about equality, man.
I love equality.
Equals happy. I'm happy, man, 'cause the sky is blue. The sky equals blue.
Then let's go and see it.
Why the hurry? The noun is safe.
Equal action.
If that's your satisfaction, man, go do your thing.
Goodbye.
There are 3 types of verbs. The main verb, that's the type we've been looking at thus far. The helping, or it's also known as auxiliary verb. Auxiliary meaning providing assistance. That is the reason that volunteer firefighters are often called auxiliary firefighters. That is also the reason that volunteer police officers are often called auxiliary police. And then linking verbs. So let's take a look at all 3.
A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. Listen up close, here's what we'll do. I'll say a verb and you say it too. Now when we're playing, when you say it, I want you to do it too. Alright, now everybody, get ready. Because the first verb we're gonna do is clap. Here we go. Clap, 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 clap. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. Listen up close.
Verbs are words used to show action or a state of being. Every sentence must have a verb or it is not a complete thought. If a sentence only has one word with a verb, it's called the main verb. But if a sentence has several words that make up a verb phrase, the last word in the verb phrase is considered the main verb, and all the other words in the verb phrase are called helping verbs. So helping verbs assist or help the main verb show action or a state of being. Helping verbs can also be called auxiliary verbs.
That we can do in order to figure out what kind of a verb we have on our hands is we can figure out if it's just a verb, a single verb, or a verb phrase. So basically, is it a single verb, or does there seem to be more than one verb in a sentence? So let's take a look at number one. I ran home. Now, we all know that there's only one verb there, and of course, there it is. I ran home. Very lovely. I being the subject, also the simple subject, ran home being the complete predicate, ran being the simple predicate, the verb. We don't have a helping verb or an auxiliary verb because we only have one verb, the main verb. And in fact, we can actually write, this is the main verb. It's all alone, it's doing its job, it's an action word. But in sentence number 2, we'll notice something else. I will have the soup. Now, it looks as if we have a verb, have, that's lovely, but I will, that also seems to be a verb. We seem to have two verbs. So do we have a verb or do we have a verb phrase? Well, we have a verb phrase, and that is because we have essentially more than one verb. Now all we have to do is figure out which is the main verb and which is the helping verb or auxiliary verb. In this case, we'll follow the basic rule. The last verb that appears is the main verb. Therefore, anything that looks like a verb that appears before the main verb is in fact a helping verb or an auxiliary verb. So let's go with our second verb. That is our main verb, right? Because it's the last one that appears in that verb phrase. And in this case then, will is our auxiliary. Let's try to spell that properly. There's a fancy pants word for you. Auxiliary. Or helping verb. It doesn't matter to me. You can use either one. Just know that they are one and the same in case anyone ever tries to quiz you on it. And then in number 3, let's try this. Police are investigating the incident. Well, you tell me. Is there a verb phrase or is there just a single verb? Let's go over it together. Let's take a look at several more examples, starting with number 4. Byram jumped over the fence and down the hill. So what we seem to have here is Byram as the complete subject, also the simple subject here, the noun. Then we have jumped over the fence and down the hill. And this is our complete predicate. As you know, we've done this many times. If that's our complete predicate, then we're looking for the verb itself for a simple predicate, and that is jumped. Jumped is our simple predicate, our verb, our action word. And notice how there aren't any words really modifying or helping this verb. It's just Byram jumped. Jump stands alone as the verb. Since this is the case, we can identify this as our main verb. Stands alone, working alone, fully functional as a verb. Lovely. So now let's go to our example number, if I could find my paintbrush, our example number 5. Here we have Miss English. Miss English is cartwheeling down the stairs. So the first thing we should do is, as usual, identify the complete subject. That's Miss English. Also happens to be the simple subject, Miss English. Now we're going to look for the complete predicate, starting with what appears to be a verb here, is cartwheeling down the stairs. So we're going to put 2 lines under the full predicate. There's the full predicate. Now we have to find the simple predicate, or the verb. But we have a little problem. Cartwheeling is an action word, but so is is. Is a kind of action word. It's a verb. It's a state of being. So here we have essentially 2 verbs working together, which means that what we seem to have here, I'm going to circle both of these as verbs, verb, verb. What we seem to have here is what we've been calling a, oops, if I could work that out, that would be great, a verb phrase. A verb phrase. More than one verb working together. Don't ask me what happened to the P in phrase. Anyway, verb phrase. More than one verb working together as really a single action is cartwheeling, meaning that she is currently actively cartwheeling at this very moment down the stairs as we speak. In this case, we do have a verb is working with our main verb, cartwheeling. We know that it's the main verb because it is the last verb in the phrase. So I'm actually going to grab my main verb up here, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put it with cartwheeling. Cartwheeling is our main verb, which means that is happens to be our auxiliary verb. So we have is as the auxiliary verb and cartwheeling as the main verb. And why is functioning as an auxiliary verb here? Because it is helping cartwheeling make sense. And it appears before cartwheeling, which is the main verb. The main verb will appear at the end of the verb phrase. So, okay, so I think we have it now. Is an auxiliary verb in this case, working to help the main verb cartwheeling. If I repeat that one more time, my head will explode. Kaboom! All right, so let's now move to example number 6. Now this is where it gets tricky. Godzilla is my favorite monster. So we have Godzilla, that is our simple subject, our subject for the sentence. Is my favorite monster is the complete predicate. But then we have the word is. And is seems to be the main verb in this sentence because it's a verb. It is sort of an action word, or verb, again. It suggests a state of being. I am, he is, Godzilla is, she is, they are. These are, again, verbs, but they suggest a state of being. Godzilla is currently my favorite monster. The problem here is that is, as a main verb standing alone, is not actually referred to as merely a main verb. And it's not functioning as an auxiliary verb because it's not helping another verb. Is my a verb? No. Godzilla is not a verb. Is standing alone. In this case, we refer to is as a linking verb. A linking verb. Now, how do we identify a linking verb? We'll figure that out as soon as we finish with main verbs and helping verbs. Remember that even though it seems very easy to identify the main verb and those helping verbs, this gets tricky, especially when, sometimes there are 2 or more helping verbs. So you might find one, but you forget about the other. So make certain that when you find the main verb, you look for helping verbs. Don't just look for one, look for 2 or even more. Number 2. Sometimes the helping verbs are separated by other words. So as soon as you find a verb, you think, oh, I'm set. I have it all taken care of. But the fact of the matter is that there might be a helping verb floating around somewhere else in the sentence. You should go find it. In 3, again, another tricky situation. Sometimes the helping verb is hidden in a question. You have to be especially careful of this because people will question you on this. So get ready.
Examples of helping verbs with main verbs include the following examples on the whiteboard. You will notice that I have underlined the helping verbs in red and the main verbs are underlined in blue. In the first example, will is the helping verb and do is the main verb. I will do the homework later today. In the second example, do becomes the helping verb and have is the main verb. So do you see a pattern here? Yes, the helping verb comes before the main verb and the main verb is always at the end of the verb phrase. You might see more than one helping verb before a main verb, and an example there is in the third sentence. I will have done my homework before tomorrow. In this case, will and have are both helping the main verb done. When you are looking for verb phrases and sentences, realize that verb phrases can be split. The next example shows a question sentence. Often the subject of that sentence, that's a question, will have the subject in the middle of the verb phrase. Do you have the notebook in class? We're speaking to the subject you, and we're asking if he or she has something. Do have. Another way that helping verbs are split with main verbs is when we insert words into the middle of verb phrases. These words are often adverbs. Here's an example. You do not have the notebook in class.
Helping verbs help the main verb make a statement and help the main verb express action. Helping verbs, satisfaction guarantee. And they are, is, am, are, was, were, be, being, been, have, has, had, do, does, did, shall, should, will, would, may, might, must, can, could. Helping verbs, satisfaction guarantee. Helping verbs, they're the ones that help the main verb. Practice them so you remember. Helping verbs, they are all assembled here. And they are, is, am, are, was, were, be, being, been, have, has, had, do, does, did, shall, should, will, would, may, might, must, can, could. Helping verbs, they are all assembled here. They are, is, am, are, was, were, be, being, been, have, has, had, do, does, did, shall, should, will, would, may, might, must, can, could. Helping verbs, satisfaction guarantee. Helping verbs.
Grammar is all about analysis, and what we often ask students to do in grammar classes is to identify the parts of speech in sentences. One problem students often have is identifying all the parts of verb phrases. A verb phrase is a verb that's composed of helping verbs and a main verb. It's easy for students to find the main verb but to skip over the helping verbs. For example, if a student is given a sentence like, Sarah has been training her llama, and is asked to identify the verb in that sentence, it's not unusual for a student to say, the verb is training. The student has missed, however, the helping verbs in that sentence, has and been. So memorizing the auxiliary verbs helps students spot them in sentences. So, here's the trick. It's really easy. All of the helping verbs can be grouped in ways that make it easy to remember them. The first and largest group are all the to-be verbs. So if you can remember all the be verbs, then you're off to a good start. The be verbs include be, being, and been. That's easy enough, right? They all start with be. Be, being, and been. The rest of the be verbs are pretty common. We use them all the time. Am, is, are, was, and were. So, be, being, been, am, is, are, was, were. Those are all the be verbs. You got them? Okay. If you can remember those, put those in a corner of your brain. And the next thing you want to remember are the three rhyming pairs. The three rhyming pairs are three rhyming pairs of words that are used as helping verbs. And those are can, could, shall, should, and will, would. And at this point, I would like to make a shout out to my friend Will Wood, who goes to my church and is a good friend of mine. And every time I meet Will and say hello to him, I always think of the helping verbs. So, you've got the to be verbs. Be, being, been, am, is, are, was, were. You can say them real fast. Am, is, are, was, were. And then you've got the three rhyming pairs. Can, could, shall, should, will, would. What's up, will? Got it? Now, the last group are the three groups of three. The three groups of three. And each of the groups start with the same letter, just like can, could, and shall, should, and will, would. So, three threes. You ready? The three threes are has, have, had, do, does, did, may, might, must. Got it? Has, have, had, do, does, did, may, might, must. Say it with me. Has, have, had, do, does, did, may, might, must. You got it? Well, even if you don't have it just yet, write these down, group them that way, and work on memorizing them. You ready? We'll go through them all again one time together. It's the to be verbs. Be, being, been, am, is, are, was, were. Then you've got the three rhyming pairs. Can, could, shall, should, will, would. What's happening, will. And then finally you've got the three groups of three. Right? You ready? Has, have, had, do, does, did, may, might, must. And that's it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Helping verbs, there are 23. Am, is, are, was, and were, being, been, and be. Have, has, had, do, does, did, shall, should, will, and would. There were 5 more helping verbs, may, might, must, can, could.
A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. Listen up close, here's what we'll do. I'll say a verb and you say it too. Now when we're playing, when you say it, I want you to do it too. Alright now everybody, get ready. Because the first verb we're gonna do is clap. Here we go. Clap, 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 clap. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb.
Okay, so what is so different about linking verbs as opposed to our standard main verbs, action verbs? Well, number one, they express a state of being rather than what we would typically call an action, a really active action. So, for instance, I am human. I am human. That's an example of a linking verb because it is a state of being. I am being human. I am human. That is my state of being. Now, that's not very active. However, I teach humans is much more of an active verb, especially if, I don't know, I'm standing while teaching. So let's try another one. She is kind. In this case, she is the linking verb, and again, it expresses a state of being rather than a real active action. She is basically being kind. That is a state of being. Unlike she smiles often. Now, that may not seem very active, but that certainly is an action word and a verb. I guess it depends on how wide you're grinning. Here we have they are miserable. So basically their state of being seems to be miserable. They are miserable. Again, not very active, and yet a state of being. They yell at strangers. Well, that could certainly be much more active than just being miserable. And then Bert seems, this is another one of those very odd linking verbs. It's a verb that we commonly use, and in this case it serves as a linking verb because it is, again, a state of being rather than an action. Bert seems angry. That is not very active when compared with Bert throws pumpkins. So I suppose that when Bert seems angry, he often throws pumpkins, but throws is a much more active verb. So that is one difference, or one special quality of linking verbs. Okay, so now I'm going to just give you a visual using Ms. Grumlet. All right, so here we have Ms. Grumlet, and she's human. Here we have Ms. Grumlet, and she's kind. Here, Ms. Grumlet is sleepy. Not much has changed. Notice that she's not doing much of anything. In fact, she's still human. She is kind. She is sleepy. Nothing has changed. That is because Ms. Grumlet has not really changed. These are just states of being. They're not actions. It's not as if we said, Miss Grumlet danced, or Miss Grumlet jumped, or Miss Grumlet yelled because she thought that her next-door neighbor couldn't hear her when she spoke. She's really not doing anything. There's no action, just a state of being. All right, so what is so different about linking verbs? Well, there's a second reason they're different. Linking verbs can be replaced by an equal sign, just as you would use in math. So if you're trying to figure out if a verb is in fact a linking verb, another test would be to just replace the verb itself with an equal sign and see if it makes sense. So for instance, I am human. If we were to change this to I equal human, I am a human, that would be true. And therefore, am is, in this case, a linking verb. However, if I were looking at the sentence, I teach humans, and I were to replace the verb teach with an equal sign, it would mean I equal humans. I do not equal humans. Therefore, it is not a linking verb. Let's try this with each of the following examples. She is kind. She and kind are basically equivalent. She is, or she equals kind. She is kind. Yes, that works. Therefore, it's a linking verb. But she smiles often. Well, if we were to replace the verb smiles, with an equal sign, she equals often makes no sense whatsoever. Therefore, it is not a linking verb. And again, if we took they are miserable and we were to include the equal sign, we would have they equal miserable. They are miserable. Same difference. And so yes, that is a linking verb. However, they yell at strangers. They equals at strangers makes no sense whatsoever. Finally, Bert seems angry, and I think you get the idea now. Bert equals angry. Bert is, in fact, angry, seems or otherwise. So in this case, seems is, in fact, a linking verb. But Bert throws pumpkins is not a linking verb, or the verb throws is not a linking verb because Bert equals pumpkins makes no sense whatsoever, unless Bert is, in fact, a pumpkin. So that is another test to use when trying to figure out whether or not a verb is a linking verb. I hope you find this helpful.
Oh, excuse me.
No worries, man. You're here. Come in. Just be.
Who are you? I don't mean to intrude.
Dude, I'm a linking verb. Be like me. Express a state of being, man.
I am
confused. Exactly, man. You equals confused. When you hear a verb you can replace with an equal sign, that's me, man. I'm all about equality, man.
I love equality!
Equals happy. I'm happy, man, cause the sky is blue. The sky equals blue. Now let's go and see.
The first sentence, I have it being used as a linking verb. The plant grew tall. Grew is just a different tense, but it's the same word of the word grow. It's the past tense of grow. So the plant grew tall. Subject is plant. Is this sentence saying that the plant is tall? Is tall going back to talk about the subject? Yes, it is. So that is a linking verb. Here we have grew acting as an action verb. I grew carrots in my garden. Is the word grew here acting as an equal sign between our subject and another word in the rest of the sentence? Is this sentence saying I am carrots? Nope. So since it's not doing that, it's not a linking verb. It's an action verb.
Am is are, was and were. These are the forms of be. These are types of linking verbs. And we have graphs, you see. Grow, remain, appear, come and sing. These are your linking verbs. We also have some senses too. And these are linking verbs. Look, smell, taste, sound, and feel. And these are linking verbs. Sing this song and learn them well. And these are linking verbs.
So just by way of review, we have main verbs, and a main verb is actually the single main fully functional verb standing on its own. It's usually pretty obvious. It's the simple predicate. And in this case we have Jim ate lunch. So ate is the main verb. In fact, it is the only verb in that very short sentence. Then we have helping verbs. In this case we have Jim is eating lunch. In this case, eating is really the main verb, if that's what we want to call it, and is merely helping eating along. So is the auxiliary or helping verb, helping the verb eating along, so that Jim is eating lunch. And then we have this oddity called the linking verb. And the main difference between a helping verb and a linking verb is that linking verbs, let's say is, linking verbs stand alone. They do not help another verb. So for instance, I've used is in two instances here. Is, in the first case, is a helping verb, and you can see it right here. Is a helping verb, right? Because it's helping the main verb eating. But in this case, as a linking verb, it stands alone. So it looks as if it's a helping verb, but it's not. It's a linking verb. Now, the way that we identify linking verbs is, well, an easy way of identifying a linking verb is to ask the question, can we replace it with an equal sign? Jim is lunch. Does Jim equal lunch? Yes, he does. Therefore, is a linking verb. Now, in this case, Jim, of course, is lunch for Godzilla, and so Jim is a sandwich. Jim is a lunch sandwich. So is, standing alone as the verb, even though it looks like it might be a helping verb, isn't helping any verb. Is standing alone, so it's a linking verb. And it suggests a state of being. Jim is lunch. They are lunch. You are lunch. I am lunch for Godzilla. And now we move on to subject-verb agreement. Subject-verb agreement. Subject-verb agreement.
A new guitar solo? Well, let's hear it. That's not a solo, that's just one chord. You're gonna have to practice a little more if the two of us are going to form a band. Dear Tim and Moby, how do I get my subjects and verbs to agree? From Harry. Subject-verb agreement is all about numbers. A subject has to agree with its verb in number. Single subjects are followed by single verbs, and plural subjects are followed by plural verbs. Well, let's take you playing the guitar. You're one single person, so we say Moby plays the guitar. Our subject is Moby, and our verb is plays. Take away the rest, and Moby plays is still a correct sentence. Moby and plays agree. But if I were to pick up a guitar and play it along with you, then our subject would be we. Well, you and me. We. That's a plural subject. Because there's more than one of us. Our sentence would be, we play the guitar. Again, you can check to see if this is correct by removing the extra words, leaving just the subject and verb. We play. It sounds right, and sometimes with English, that's the best way to know if something's correct. Well, listen. We play agrees in number, but we plays does not. You can hear that the first way just sounds correct. Actually, most verbs that end in S are singular. That's the opposite of nouns. When they end in S, they're usually plural. Alright, let's get back to our music. What do you mean you're quitting the band? I'm too demanding. What are you talking about? Fine. I'll just go solo.
This section, we need a little refresher course on how subjects and verbs are supposed to work together. Basically, they must agree. They must agree.
In a sentence, the subject is the noun that performs the action, whatever the action may be. And the verb, that's the action, the zing of the sentence. When these two come together, they should have the proper form. What's the proper form, you ask? Well, Sparky, it depends on what the subject of the sentence is. Remember, the subject determines the form of the verb we need to use.
Let's look at some of the different kinds of subjects there can be. For instance, the personal pronouns. The personal pronouns are great because by discussing them, we can discuss all the possible verb forms there are.
We can have the singular subjects I, you, he, she, and it. The plural subjects are we and they.
So as you can see, we can have either singular or plural subjects in the sentences we write. The grammar experts call this concept a subject's number. If we use either I, you, he, she, or it, well then, our subject's number is singular. If we use either we or they, then our number is plural.
Now, it's not like all these nouns are on some team together and they all need different numbers like 88, 12, or 26. Remember, a noun's number is either singular or plural.
That sounds like a good rule. Let's call it a grammar guide.
The grammar guide, then, is that a subject's number is either singular or plural. That's it.
The noun that we care about in a sentence is the subject. This is the important one. It's the noun that performs the action. And the subject is the noun that gets hooked up with the verb. Our little verby must fit in nicely with the subject.
And that, in a nutshell, is agreement.
And our grammar guide for nouns and verbs is, the subject and the verb in a sentence must agree in terms of number. A singular subject takes a singular verb.
Singular means one, as in single. He, she, it, Bob, Sue, Jerome, Penelope. Plural means more than one. Plurality. They, we, Bob and Sue, Mary and Joe. A singular subject must take a singular verb. That's the rule. A plural subject must take a plural verb. That's the other rule. Remember that the subject always determines which form of the verb you will use, whether it be singular, single, or plural, more than one. So always check for your subject, and then you'll know which verb to use.
This is how it should work in your sentences. When you use a singular subject, make sure you have a singular verb. And when you use a plural subject, make sure you have a plural verb. Okay, that's the way subjects and verbs should agree. But sometimes, during the frantic pell-mell process of writing your ideas down, your sentences may fall prey to subject-verb disagreement.
Let's take as our subject Tommy and Belinda. Since there's two people, this is a plural subject. And let's take as our verb to dance.
We conjugate to dance like this. I dance, you dance, he, she, and it dances. We dance and they dance. Now, let's put our noun and verb together and see what's up.
Tommy and Belinda and dance. Tommy and Belinda are our subjects, so that means we have a plural subject. In this case, it's the same as saying they dance. So the subject is the third person plural, and the third person plural form of to dance is simply dance. Great!
But what if we wrote Tommy and Belinda dances? Well, that's not right. We have a plural simple subject, Tommy and Belinda, with the third person singular form of the verb, dances. The nouns and the verb disagree. As we just saw, the correct way to write this is Tommy and Belinda dance. Watch those kids cut the rug.
Let's change our subject now. What happens if we just have Tommy as our subject?
Okay, now we have Tommy dances. Whoa, our verb form is now dances. Why the change? Well, Tommy is our subject, so we just use the third person singular form of the verb, dances.
So it would be improper to say Tommy dance. That's not right either. Tommy is the third person singular, and we must use the proper verb form with it, dances.
Although in these sentences the disagreement seems pretty obvious, there are other sneakier sentences.
That seems just too easy, but the fact of the matter is that oftentimes the subject is separated from the verb by many words in between. And of course that causes some confusion for the writer. Oftentimes writers use the wrong verb form because they are losing track of the actual subject in the sentence. So let's have a look at some trickier situations.
A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. Listen up close, here's what we'll do. I'll say a verb and you say it too. Now when we're playing, when you say it, I want you to do it too. Alright now everybody, get ready. Because the first verb we're gonna do is clap. Here we go. Clap, 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 clap. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it.
Sometimes you'll find a sentence where the simple subject contains an appositive phrase.
Remember that an appositive is a descriptive phrase that either restates the simple subject of a sentence or adds new information about it.
Like in the sentence, Dr. Frankenstein, the famous scientist, went down to the graveyard. The famous scientist is an appositive because it gives us more information about Dr. Frankenstein.
Using an appositive is a great way to elaborate on the simple subject. Things can get sticky though.
when the simple subject is singular and the appositive is plural, or vice versa, when the simple subject is plural and the appositive is singular. Here, we'll show you what we mean.
Consider the sentence, the stampeding herd, mostly anteaters and wildebeests, are destroying my eggplant. Before we go into how this sentence doesn't quite work, let's take it apart and figure out exactly what we're dealing with here.
The complete subject of our sentence is the chunk that performs the verb, are destroying, which in this case is the stampeding herd, mostly anteaters and wildebeests. Now comes the tricky part, identifying the noun that is a simple subject. Our candidates are herd and anteaters and wildebeests.
Notice how mostly anteaters and wildebeests is just a way for us to elaborate on herd. That would make herd the simple subject and mostly anteaters and wildebeests an appositive phrase, which gives us more information about the herd. But what we're really talking about is the herd.
So now that we know the simple subject is herd, which is singular, maybe we should take issue with our verb, are destroying. The herd are destroying. Does that sound right?
I don't think so.
Yes, I think we've got a little disagreement with the subject and the verb.
Our actual simple subject is herd, but we were distracted by the appositive, mostly anteaters and wildebeests, which is plural. That's probably because it's easier to visualize and it's closer to the verb, but we need to stay focused on our simple subject, herd, and choose the form of the verb that agrees with it. One great way to stay focused once you have identified the simple subject is to remove the appositive. Then take the simple subject and hook it up with the correct form.
In the sentence, the stampeding herd, comma, mostly anteaters and wildebeests, comma, is or are destroying my eggplant crop, what we find is that mostly anteaters and wildebeests, that little phrase that appears between the two commas, is actually an appositive. And all that does is add some additional information about the subject. So it basically refers back to the subject. Now, we know, because we're smart, that the actual simple subject in this case is herd. And I'm sorry that's not blue, but that is the actual subject. So what we have to do is we have to make certain that the verb agrees with the subject, herd. So rather than deal with that appositive, we're just going to imagine that it's not there at all, ignore it for now, and work with the sentence, the stampeding herd. The stampeding herd are destroying my eggplant crop? No, it's the stampeding herd is destroying my eggplant crop. Therefore, if we were to come back up to the top to fix this, it would actually be the stampeding herd, mostly anteaters and wildebeests, is destroying my eggplant crop, even though it may not sound quite right. So there you have it. The sentence has been fixed.
New sentence. The anteaters and wildebeests, now a stampeding herd, are destroying my eggplant crop. Now our subject is the plural anteaters and wildebeests, and our appositive is the singular herd. Notice how we had to change the verb is to its plural form are to accommodate the new plural subject, the anteaters and wildebeests. Tricky, tricky.
As you can see, having an appositive that is different in number from the simple subject can cast all your plans for harmonious subject-verb agreement asunder.
For the sentence we just had, the anteaters and wildebeest, now a stampeding herd, are destroying my eggplant crop. We could have just ignored what was inside the commas, now a stampeding herd. That way we would have been just fine. So to repeat, to hook up the noun with the proper verb, sometimes you can ignore what's inside the commas.
Another thing to watch out for is when the verb and subject of your sentence are separated by a long intervening phrase or clause. Check out the following sentence.
The package, which includes 15 balls, 12 yo-yos, and 7 jacks, is almost ready to send.
Let's break our sentence down. What we have here is a dependent clause, which includes 15 balls, 12 yo-yos, and 7 jacks, injected into the middle of our independent clause. The package is almost ready to send.
Remember that an independent clause is one that can stand alone, while a dependent clause needs to lean on an independent clause for support.
Our subject here is package, a singular, so we use the singular form of the verb is. We have to resist the temptation to use a plural form of the verb here, which we might want to do since we're dealing with so many different toys, But you have to remember to keep your eyes on the subject, no matter how far away it is from the verb. Let's make it a grammar guide. To ensure proper
subject from the verb. And you're going to run into sentences like this all of the time, so be prepared and be vigilant, always looking for the actual subject, the simple subject of the sentence. Sometimes the subject and the verb can be separated by an appositive, which provides extra information about the subject. We've seen some examples. Or by a dependent clause, you know what that is. Or by a phrase, such as a prepositional phrase. In the example on the screen, the dog behind the parked cars is barking, is a perfect example of the use of a prepositional phrase, which of course describes the location of the dog, but might confuse the writer, who may sort of lose track of the dog as the subject, and then the appropriate verb is in is barking. The dog is barking. That's the actual main portion of the sentence. Behind the parked cars is merely a prepositional phrase. Prepositions usually refer to location. So when we say the dog is behind the parked cars, the dog is across the street, the dog is around the back of the house, the dog is between the cars, the dog is inside the house. So just keep that in mind. Now, all of these, the appositive, the dependent clause, the prepositional phrase, have one thing in common. They add information regarding the actual subject. Therefore, you have to look carefully for the subject in order to then select the correct verb for that subject. So always keep that in mind.
It is a great time to be alive because today we're talking about subject-verb agreement. Now, subjects and verbs have to agree, which is just a fancy way of saying that they have to sound right together. And you're probably used to this in its most basic form. For instance, subject-verb agreement explains why you say, by noon, I am always starving, but you say, by noon, Grace is always starving. Subject-verb agreement is the idea that the subject determines how the verb sounds or conjugates. Now, of course, it's going to be much trickier than I am and Grace is on the SAT, and you'll have to watch out for subject-verb agreement on two major question types, identifying errors and improving sentences. Now, like I said, it gets much trickier, so let's go into depth now. Now, just a second ago, I gave you an easy example of subject-verb agreement, I am, and also Grace is. Now, the reason it's so easy is that the subject and the verb are next to each other. I is next to am, Grace is next to is. Now, the way the SAT makes these subject-verb agreement problems tougher is by moving the subject and the verb further apart. And they do it in two ways right here. So, in order to see whether the subject and the verb on the SAT sound right together, you're going to have to ignore these two things, these things that are keeping the subject and the verb apart. So they are extra information between commas and prepositional phrases. And each of these is pretty detailed, so we're going to take time to go in depth with each of them, starting with extra information between commas. First of all, what does this mean, extra information between commas? You know you're dealing with extra information between commas if you could use parentheses or long dashes in place of the pair of commas. Let me show you what that looks like. Sally Ride, the first American woman in space, made history in 1983. Now, the first American woman in space is going to be quote-unquote extra information between commas because I could also write it with parentheses and I could also write it with long dashes. Now, these probably won't appear on the SAT, but they're just ways of thinking about how this is extra information being thrown your way. Now, because it's extra information, you're going to be able to ignore it when looking for subject-verb agreement. Let's look at an example here. My father, who has sung backup for dozens of solo artists and bands, are truly talented. So we have extra information between commas here. And I know that because I could ignore the commas and put this between parentheses, like my father, who has sung backup for dozens of solo artists and bands, are truly talented, or I could also put them between long dashes. Now, I'm not suggesting that you actually need to go around drawing long dashes and parentheses on the SAT. I'm just saying it's a way of checking if this is extra information. So, if you know it's extra information by applying this little test, you can ignore it for the purposes of subject-verb agreement. Let me show you. What's left is a nice short sentence where the subject and the verb are adjacent again. So we're back to that situation like I am or Grace is. We have, my father are truly talented. Now, you probably already knew the sentence was wrong, but now it's even more obvious. My father are should definitely be my father is. So sure enough, here's the final answer. My father, who has sung backup for dozens of solo artists and bands, is truly talented. Let's look at a couple more examples and they'll get a little more subtle. The warnings, which were outlined in the government's special report, has to be seriously considered. First of all, let's check that we have extra information between commas. Could we, for instance, put this in parentheses? Let's see if that makes sense. The warnings, which were outlined in the government's secret report, or rather special report, has to be seriously considered. That sounds like it makes sense, and let's strike it through. What we have left is the warnings has to be seriously considered. I hope it's a little more obvious now that the verb is conjugated wrong. Warnings has isn't right, but warnings have is. So the right answer should have the verb have, not the verb has. And there it is. Third example. According to friends, physicist Richard P. Feynman, who enjoyed lockpicking, Mayan hieroglyphs, and many other unusual topics, were quite entertaining. Now, this one's a little more subtle, but we still have extra information between commas right here. You could omit this and you'd still have a sentence. Let's see what that looks like. According to friends, physicist Richard P. Feynman were quite entertaining. That should sound even more obviously wrong than it did before, when we had all the information in the middle, and as you might imagine, it should be was. Let's look at the final answer. Sure enough, the word was is there. All right, the second thing we need to talk about, after talking about extra information between commas, is prepositions. We're also going to need to ignore these when we're looking for subject-verb agreement, because as I said earlier, they keep the subject and the verb far apart and make it hard to check if they agree with each other. So, first of all, prepositions are words that express positions or relationships. That's a little abstract, so let me give you some examples. Here are a ton of prepositions, and I don't expect you to memorize them off here, but two things. Number one, you can find a list in the bonus materials and get comfortable that way. Number two, you can think of them as doghouse words. So they're words that you can use to show your relationship to a doghouse. For instance, you can be in the doghouse, you can be up against the doghouse, you can be over the doghouse, you can be of the doghouse, although it's kind of a strange expression. So you can think of prepositions as doghouse words. Now, how do we use that with subject-verb agreement? Well, there's yet another step. We actually need to know what a prepositional phrase is. So this is getting pretty involved, so let's have a look. A prepositional phrase is a preposition plus the associated words. Pretty abstract, so let's look at some concrete examples. Examples would be something like of gold, where the preposition is of, and you say, what is it of? It's of gold. Or in the doghouse again, the preposition is in, and you say, in what? It's in the doghouse. From Colombia, where from is the preposition, and Colombia is where she's from. And so on. By the grocery store, on the way home, and with red, white, and blue sprinkles. So what do we do with this? We have to ignore the prepositional phrases, so first we have to identify the prepositional phrases. Where's the preposition here? If you're not yet comfortable, you should definitely study the bonus materials and come back and rewatch this, but here we go. The preposition is of, and the question is, of what? Of his eyes, that's the prepositional phrase. So we're going to cross this out for a moment because it's a prepositional phrase, and try to do subject-verb agreement between what's left. We have the color are blue. I hope you can tell that sounds wrong. And it is. It should be the color.
Verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. Listen up close, here's what we'll do. I'll say a verb and you say it too. Now when we're playing, when you say it, I want you to do it too. Okay, the next verb we're gonna do is jump. Now remember, I want to hear you say jump and I want to see you jumping. Jump, 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 jump.
part 2 of subject-verb agreement. I can see you're a glutton for punishment and back for more. So we'll start out with a quick recap of what you've covered so far. First up, subjects and verbs have to agree, which means they have to sound right together. And that explains why you say, by noon I am always starving, but you say, by noon Grace is always starving. The verb and the noun have to sound right together. Of course, it's much trickier on the SAT, and subject-verb agreement is tested throughout the writing section on identifying errors questions and improving sentences questions. Now, in addition to the old rules, we also have to know about the new rules, which are here. First off, know these singular subjects: each, every, any, either, neither, one, and none. And with compound subjects that use or nor, you need to make the verb agree with the second subject. Don't confuse there is or was with there are or were. And lastly, watch out for weird word order when it comes to subject-verb agreement. Let's go into all of these rules in more detail. So the first new rule for subject-verb agreement is that there are certain words that are singular, and you need to make sure that the verb agrees as if they were singular subjects, which they are. So those words are each, every, any, either, neither, one, and none. And when you use them, you have to use the same verb conjugations that you would with other singular subjects like he or it. And let's, of course, see some examples. One of my friends are here today. So here the subject is the word one, and I hope you recognize that as one of the singular subjects we just mentioned. Now we ignore of my friends, which is a prepositional phrase. You should definitely remember that from the first unit on subject-verb agreement. And then what we have left is one are here today. That doesn't sound right, and it definitely isn't right. It should be one is. So the original sentence should actually be changed to one of my friends is here today. One is singular, is goes with singular, that's fixed. Now that one sounds pretty straightforward, but it does get weirder, so let's look at this example. None of my friends are here today. Almost the exact same sentence, but the word one has become none. But it's not that different because none is still one of those singular words, and of my friends is still a prepositional phrase we ignore. So none are here today might sound okay to you, but it's not, and that's why we're talking about it. None is one of those singular words that might not sound singular, but it is. So just like you'd have to say he is here today, because he is singular, or it is here today, because it is singular, you have to say none is here today, because none is singular. This might not sound right, but it is. The sentence actually needs to be, believe it or not, none of my friends is here today. I promise it's weird, but that's the way it works. Last example, each of the three brothers want to take over the family business. Now it might sound okay, but it's not. Let me show you why. Each is the subject, and it's one of those singular words. And of the brothers is a prepositional phrase, so for the purposes of subject-verb agreement, we ignore it. And then we have each want. Now that might sound okay to you, it might not, but it's not because each is a singular word, so it needs to conjugate the verb in the same way that another singular word would. So just like you would say it wants or he wants, you need to say each wants. So the sentence should actually be, each of the three brothers wants to take over the family business. So that's the first rule. Next up, or nor. With compound subjects that use or nor, which means a subject with a subject, and then the word or nor, and then another subject, you need to make the verb agree with the second subject. Of course, there are examples, so let's look at those. First up, most fans agree that John or Paul were the cutest of all the Beatles. Now, or tells us we have a compound subject, and that connects two subjects, right? John on the one hand and Paul on the other. And the rule with compound subjects with or nor is that we have to agree with the second subject. So that's Paul. Nothing personal, but we don't care about John right now. So Paul was the cutest of all the Beatles. Not Paul were, but Paul was. So the overall sentence needs to be, most fans agree that John or Paul was the cutest of all the Beatles. And one more example for this principle. After a long day in the sun, neither coffee nor hot tea sound particularly tempting. So we know we're dealing with a compound subject because we have nor here, connecting coffee on the one hand with hot tea on the other. And with compound subjects connected with or nor, we look at the second subject, hot tea, and we conjugate with the second subject. So hot tea sound tempting doesn't sound right. Hot tea sounds tempting does. So the correct sentence or the correct answer choice that you'd want to look for would be something like, after a long day in the sun, neither coffee nor hot tea sounds particularly tempting. So that's that rule. Next up, watch out for there is was and there are were. You don't want to confuse this pair with the other pair because there is or there was should be followed by a singular subject. It makes sense. You would say it is or it was, so when you use there is and there was, you need to be talking about a singular subject. Meanwhile, with there are or there were, you're talking about something plural, like they are or they were, so you're going to need a plural subject to follow. Let's look at some quick examples. The ancient Greeks believed there was just 4 basic elements: earth, water, fire, and air. So we look at what we're talking about, and it's 4 basic elements. That's plural, of course, so you can't say there was, you have to say there were. Pretty simple. Next up.
For instance, we have a side of peas. Those tasty and starchy vegetables makes an excellent healthy addition to a meal. Many people, when they write this, they might think vegetables and peas and think it should be a side of peas. Those tasty and starchy vegetables make an excellent healthy addition to a meal. It even sounds right if you don't think about it. But it's important that the main verb makes matches with the true subject, side. So a side of peas, those tasty and starchy vegetables, makes an excellent healthy addition to a meal. The research library, which has zillions of books, marks an important destination for the budding researcher. It's important that we keep in mind that marks goes to library, not the zillions of books. Just pay attention to the main subject of every sentence.
What's the subject in this sentence? You got it. Apple. What's the verb? Falls. The subject, apple, is singular, and therefore the verb must also be singular. Here's another example. The unruly group of students was reprimanded for their disruptive behavior. What is the subject in this sentence? Be careful. The word group is the subject of this sentence. You might have been tempted to choose students, but the noun closest to the verb is not always the subject of the sentence. The verb in this sentence is was. The subject, group, is singular, so the verb must be in singular form. Let's look at one more. Companies large and small still buy advertisements in mass media outlets that reaches large numbers of consumers. What's the issue with this sentence? Incorrect subject-verb agreement. Reaches is the incorrect verb form. What is the subject of the verb reaches? Advertisements. Reaches is the singular form of the verb. Advertisements is a plural noun, so it requires the plural verb, reach. Now that you've learned how to identify the subject and verb of a sentence, it's time for guided practice to further hone these skills.
Singular subjects must have singular verbs. Confusion often comes, however, when students begin forming more complex sentences and separate the subject and verb with prepositional phrases. Consider the following sentence. Each of the students have homework to complete. Although the plural have agrees with the noun students, the subject-verb agreement here is incorrect. Students is the object of the prepositional phrase, of the students, and cannot be the subject. Instead, each is the subject of the sentence and always singular. Thus, the correct verb form for this sentence would be has. Each of the students has homework to complete. That one was pretty easy to recognize. However, the further the subject is from the verb, the more difficult it can be to determine. For instance, one of the doctors in the operating room with the patients asked that you stay outside. In this sentence, the verb is separated from its subject by 3 prepositional phrases: of the doctors, in the operating room, and with the patient. The actual subject of the sentence is the singular one, which requires the singular verb asks. You should avoid simplifying the sentence as your solution to the subject-verb agreement problem. Your professor will appreciate the occasional, more complex structure. Instead, you should identify and then ignore any prepositional phrases that come before the verb. Ignoring the prepositional phrases in the above sentence would give us 1. Ask that you stay outside. From what you learned back in elementary school, along with your own intuition as a speaker of English, you can easily recognize this agreement as incorrect. It's important to remember when working on subject-verb agreement that singular pronouns, no matter their antecedents, are always considered singular. These include any, anybody, anyone, every, everybody, everyone, no one, nobody, none, something, somebody, each, either, and neither. If any of these words functions as the subject of your sentence, you need a singular verb for agreement.
Hello, and welcome to our podcast on agreement. This is a pretty important grammatical thing for us to be looking at, and so we wanted to offer some reminders and perhaps talk about some new ideas. So let's go ahead and get into that right away. So the first thing to look at is the idea of subject and verb agreement. This is where the subject of a sentence must agree with that sentence's verb in terms of number, meaning in terms of either being singular or plural. This should be a reminder, but the idea is a singular subject takes the singular form of the verb, whereas a plural subject will take a plural verb. That's probably pretty common sense. That's not really an issue that we have, but sometimes we have to make sure that we are finding the correct subject to make our verbs agree with. In a simple sentence, as the examples down here show, the dog ran to the school. Dog, as subject, is right next to its verb, ran. That's not really the problem. The problem is when we get into these more complicated sentences that we're both reading and writing, and this is where the subject is oftentimes separated from its verb by some other grammatical structure. And that is what is causing us some confusion, because we are trying to make our verb agree with something that is not the subject. So for example, the congressmen of the United States are in session. So if we look at this, we have to find the subject. What is the simple subject, the word that this sentence is about? And the word is congressman. That is plural, therefore the verb has to be are. Now, a lot of people look at this and go, okay, well, the congressman of the United States is in session. That is incorrect, because United States, we do take a singular verb with that, but United States is not the subject of that sentence. That sentence is truly about congressmen, meaning plural. Number 2, although sweet, the lollipops in the bag are also tart. Our subject is lollipops, not bag. Here's the hint. The subject of a sentence can never be in a prepositional phrase. So if you're thinking, ooh, there's a word right next to my verb, or where my verb has to be, and that word is plural, if you see that it's in a prepositional phrase, that's not your subject. And so you need to find the one word simple subject, and that is the word that needs to agree. For example, the ships in the harbor were painted. Ships needs to agree with were painted. The dog who was baying at the moon was black. In that case, no matter what you try to make it agree with, it's going to come out to be singular. So even if you mess it up and try to say, oh, I have to make it agree with moon, you're going to get it right by accident. But the simple subject in that sentence is dog. So the dog was black. The ships were painted. So here's another example for us. A family of Celtic werewolves was off for a picnic on the cliffs. The subject, the simple subject, is the word family. And family, even if there are many people within that family, the word family is going to take a singular verb. And so the idea is family was. Another example, the nymph who left these footprints is usually much more cautious. Our subject is nymph, which is singular, therefore it needs to take a singular verb, which in this case is. Number 3, the robot you've been sending flowers to is wearing his heart on his sleeve. The simple subject is robot, and therefore the robot is wearing. And I think a way to double check your work is to try and read the simple subject with its verb, taking out any sort of modifying stuff or extra crap that's in the middle. Just read the simple subject and the simple verb, and if those agree, then you've gotten it right. Therefore, the robot is wearing. That sounds right. But if you were to say something like, the robot are wearing, that makes no sense. So you know that you can go back and say, robot is singular, is wearing is singular, that is in agreement. So go ahead and take a look at these and see if you can find the correct verb to make agree with the correct subject. And another page of practice here. Now here are some examples of what I'm calling weird nouns. When these words are the subjects of sentences, they tend to take some exceptional forms. So we just want to make sure that we're on the same page here. And looking at these words, or words like these, they are plural in form, meaning they end in an S. So it seems like there's more than one. But they take a singular verb. For example, physics is a fun class. Mathematics is important. Ethics as a class is a fun class to take. All of these, they look plural because they end in an S, and they seem to be more than one, but they take a singular verb to go with them. Here's some other weird nouns. They have two moving parts, and so it seems like they would be a singular item, but they take plural verbs. For example, the scissors are over on the table. The tweezers are on the countertop. So even though tweezers is one thing, like you can hold them up in one hand because there's one item, they take a plural verb, I guess because there's two little pointy things that go with those. And so be wary of these, that you wouldn't say the scissors is over here. It's the scissors are, even though there's only one of them, but they have two moving
Suppose
parts.
our sentence is, the leopard or the crocodile enjoys tasty tourists. Simply by changing our conjunction and into or, we have changed the number of our subject to singular, since either the leopard or the crocodile will enjoy the tasty tourist, but not both. That's why we need to use the verb enjoys, a singular.
Now let's suppose our subject becomes the leopard or the crocodiles. Here we have two simple subjects, but one, leopard, is singular and the other, crocodiles, is plural. So what form of the verb do we use? Singular or plural? It just so happens we have a rule to guide us when a problem like this comes up.
Whenever your sentence has two simple subjects that differ in number connected by the conjunction or, use the form of the verb that agrees with the simple subject closest to it. We can use a three-step process to help us out.
Step 1. Find the verb. Step 2. Find the closest simple subject. Step 3. Use the form of the verb that agrees with this simple subject.
So our sentence could read, the leopard or the crocodiles enjoy tasty tourists. Here, since the plural crocodiles is closer to the verb, we use the third person plural form of the verb to enjoy, which is enjoy.
Now if we switch things around and change the order of the subjects, well, we have to switch the verb to match. We could also say, the crocodiles or the leopard enjoys tasty tourists. Now that the singular leopard is closer to the verb, we should change the verb to its singular form, enjoys.
So, that's how you avoid the trap of subject-verb disagreement. First, remember to focus on the subject and not be distracted by all those other pesky nouns and appositives that can throw you off. Next, determine whether it is a singular or plural. And finally, use the form of the verb that agrees with that number.
If your subject contains two elements that have different numbers and it's unclear which one to choose, go with the one closest to the verb. Remember, it is only safe to do this when the nouns are connected by the conjunction or, and the noun you decide to go with is one of the simple subjects of the sentence. This is because the verb has to agree with the subject, not just any old noun you find.
A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. Listen up close, here's what we'll do. I'll say a verb and you say it too. Now when we're playing, when you say it, I want you to do it too. Alright, now everybody, get ready. Because the first verb we're gonna do is clap. Here we go. Clap, 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 clap. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. Listen up close, here's what we'll do. I'll say a verb and you say it too. Now when we're playing, when you say it, I want you to do it too. Okay, the next verb we're gonna do is jump. Now remember, I want to hear you say jump and I want to see you jumping. Jump, 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 jump. Verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. Listen up close, here's what we'll do. I'll say a verb and you say it too. Now when we're playing, when you say it, I want you to do it too. Okay, my verbalicious friends. The last verb that we're gonna do is shake. Now I'm not talking about a milkshake. I wanna see those arms wiggling and those heads bopping. Shake, 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 shake. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. A verb is a word, it's an action word. If you can do it, then you do it. If you do it, it's a verb. Listen up close, here's what we'll do. I'll say a verb and you say it too. Now when we're playing, when you say it, I want you to do it too. Alright, now we're gonna break it down a little bit and then speed it up. Alright, let's verbalize this place. Clap, 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 clap. Jump, 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 jump. Clap, 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 clap. Jump, 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 jump. Clap, 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 clap. Jump, 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 jump. Shake, 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 shake. Clap, 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 clap. Jump, 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 jump. Shake, 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 shake. Clap, clap. Jump, jump, 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 shake, shake. Clap, 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 clap. Jump, jump, shake, 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 shake. Jump, jump, clap, 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 clap. Jump, jump, shake, 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 shake. Jump, jump, clap, 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 clap. Jump, jump, shake, 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 shake. Jump, jump, clap, 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 clap. Jump, jump, shake, 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 shake. Jump, jump. A verb is a word, it's an action word. Now clap, 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 clap. A verb is a word, it's an action word. Now jump, 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 jump. A verb is a word, it's an action word. Now shake, 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 shake. A verb is a word, it's an action word. Now jump, 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 jump. A verb is a word, it's an action word.